Welcome to Amazing Indiana Music Stories.
Music history includes a lot of people other than musicians, singers, and performers. There are scores of others behind the scenes that make it all possible. Studio engineers, producers, tour managers, venue managers, lighting and video technicians, retailers, publishers, and more. Every concert has a person out front operating sophisticated audio equipment and controlling exactly what the audience hears. That person is known as a front house engineer. Today we're talking to a gentleman who's been doing this and a lot of other things locally and internationally for well over 50 years. Dan Kasting, welcome to our oral history project.
Glad to be here.
So let's start out at the beginning, a little bit about your early life.
St. Vincent's Hospital on Fall Creek. The doctor that delivered me was Dr. Harcourt Road, if you know that. So anyway,
And
so that's how I began.
So, growing up, were you exposed to music? Did your parents play music around the house? Did that interest you at all, or was it just the technology that interested
Actually,
you?
what got me, probably what started my musical career was singing in a Lutheran grade school choir. And since everybody has to go to church, all children are in the choir. So as I grew up singing, first I was a soprano, then I was an alto, and as my voice cracked and changed, you had to listen to the other parts singing in the choir. So that's probably why I felt very comfortable doing vocal acts.
Did you
later on in my career, it's always vocals.
Did you play an instrument?
No.
No instrument in junior high.
There was a rental band guy that came around to our grade school.
Of course he did.
And I played trombone for a while.
Okay. But that really didn't
No
have
clue
any bearing. At what point did you realize that it was the audio and the sound and the technology and that kind of stuff and tinkering that interested you more than playing trombone?
Well, after trying to play the trombone the next afternoon, I was completely over it. So anyway, there was no transition there. I had a neighbor of ours was a ham radio operator. He had an antenna. He also had an old Conn organ cabinet that he gave me when I was a little kid to take apart and pull the speakers out and see how this thing all worked. So, and my dad had a TV repairman friend who gave me old TV sets, and I was stripping parts out of the TVs. So the mechanics of all that stuff was like things that I played with as a little kid.
Taking apart's one thing. Did you ever put them back together?
All the time. My dad happened to be in Patton's army at World War II, and he came home with a bunch of stuff. We had 3 German field telephones. I don't know if you've ever seen those hard shell things. At one point in time, my dad bought me a switchboard from Army surplus. So literally, we were out way on the south side, out in the middle of nowhere. We had 2,000-foot spools of twisted pair wire that we'd run to our neighbor's house. And so as little kids, we were playing. That's what we did.
Play Army.
We didn't sit and watch our screen all the time. We were out there.
You were the comm guy for the brigade.
Yeah. Comms, yeah.
At some point, there were bands in high school that you ended up getting involved with.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine that I hang out with at the dog park over here, Don Gary. Hadn't seen him in 40 years. And ran into him at the dog park. Don Gary, he was in one of the bands that I hung out with when I was a kid at the Baxter Y. Anyway, that was carrying around equipment for the band. I knew how to hook up stuff, so it was a natural for me.
Hook the stuff up. So, our main focus, we're going to get onto some other stuff, but our main focus is Indiana music history. So the bands that you worked with early on, 60s and 70s, are the ones that are going to fit real tightly into the Indiana music history. And there was a few really in late '60s, right before the '70s.
Late 60s was, the Chosen Few, the Idle Few were two of the bands, the Dawn Five, the Boys Next Door. These were the local bands that, I tend to gravitate to because I knew how to hook up their stuff, and which I did,
Yeah, tell us about the live sound equipment that was being used when one of those bands played a sock hop. Columns and Radio Shack.
Bogan mixers, a lot of Bogan mixers, sometimes an Altec mixer, 1506 mixer, I think. Anyway, that was the stuff back in the day. CLS horns, Community Light and Sound horns that had, not Community Light and Sound, Electro Voice.
Yeah.
ID, 60-watt drivers.
Basically paging systems.
Yeah.
Football stadium paging systems for voice.
Yep, exactly. I didn't start getting into actual speaker cabinets. Geez, it must have been 1969, Anyway, that after high school was when Sherwood Country Club started, which was on the south side. And that's when a lot of local bands, and then we got to see regional bands. And they were touring around with, custom PAs, Custom, the brand name,
Yeah.
Sun Instruments, SUNN. That's where I met, Michael McDonald back in the day, REO Speedwagon.
They all played.
Everybody, yeah. The number of people that played there, and what were all the other?
At some point, then the Chosen Few became Limousine and became the Faith Band.
Yep.
And at that point, you probably put together one of the better little PAs at the time. At one point, it was the Sun stuff, and then at one point, it got much bigger.
Oh yeah, the Sun. What did I have? I had a Sun Coliseum system with two 8-channel consoles, desks. That was what was the place on the north side? Max Apter. That's when Awakening, we started the band Awakening. Toby was in that band. Anyway, that was a Sun Coliseum PA, which is the old JBL gold lens, 215 box, the 200S cabinet. Yeah. Faith Band, that's when we started in with 2440 drivers on the 90-degree horn, the double 15 cabinet, large stuff, bigger and bigger amplifiers. Gee, I remember my first Mac 240 to drive the 2440s.
Yep. So those were the good old days.
Yeah.
And
And when you made a mistake and you blew up your horns or something, you really avoided making that mistake again because the diaphragms were really expensive to buy and replace.
yeah,
I'm sure you remember that.
yeah, we all remember that. At some point, and I know this because I was there, and you got called away to go out touring with the rock band, and I ended up with the Faith Band gig, and that was early '74, I believe. And what was that tour?
It was,
That would have been your first tour.
No, in '74 would have been either REO Speedwagon or slightly after. So I was with Speedwagon for several years. Who was after that? Jay Giles' band was in there in the mix for a while. That was an intense
So were you working
tour.
for the band or for the sound company?
Sound company.
Which
almost-
was
That was Audio Freaks out of Cincinnati.
some of that Zen Audio too?
No, Zen Audio. Zen was Charlie Daniels' band, and we split up. There were 3 companies. We all did Bob Seger at one time. It was Fanfare, Zen Audio, and Broad Ripple Audio.
So now we're up into through the '70s, kind of, right? Late '70s, Jay Giles.
Kind of Uriah Heep was one of the more disastrous kind of a tours. That's the one that started out with 3 tractor trailers and ended up 2 vans and a bobtail. It was awful.
Downhill fast.
Yeah, Mark Hogan and I went to see a Spinal Tap after that tour was over, and we walked out of the movie.
Too close to home.
It was, oh my God, it was just, I mean, we're leaving pieces of the set behind and stuff. I mean,
Good stuff. So, at some point then, you and Hogue, if I remember the story, you both had the option of doing a female vocalist. Does that sound right? That's from.
well, we had two. A friend of mine had come back from Europe. His name's John Cutcliffe. He was burnout. He had been in Europe for 3 months on shows, and he came back. I actually bumped into him at Park West in Chicago. He landed from Europe or from England. He had 3 hours off. He came into the Park West in Chicago to do something, and forget who was playing, but I ran into him at Park West, and I just got back from Europe. He was on his way back to Los Angeles, and so literally on the flip of a coin, Mark Hogue and I just Manhattan Transfer or Melissa Manchester. And on the flip of a coin, I got Manhattan Transfer, and I was happy because I was going to Japan in 2 weeks, which was like, that's the beginning of my overseas stuff. And that might have been around the time when I said, hey, Jeff, you want to handle the band for me? I'm gone. See you. Bye. Gone. And spent the next 15 years in Los Angeles.
Yeah, and so Mantran, that was
the
several.
80s in Los Angeles was everything they tell you it was.
So Mantran for several years and several times around the globe, right?
10 years, just about. And every year we go to Europe at different seasons, jazz festivals in the summer. I mean, different seasons in Europe, different seasons in Japan, Australia. I mean, the touring was fabulous.
So at this point, this is all front of house work, right? The way I described it at the head, or were you system engineer, or were you were mixing, right?
Well, when I was at Maryland Sound in Baltimore, I was with I was with Manhattan Transfer, and to get ready for the tour, I would go out with George Benson for 2 weeks. My friend Al Tucker was George's engineer, and I'd go out as a systems engineer, load and unload trucks and plug stuff in, getting ready for my tour. So we did things like that,
But then, like Mantran, that was you were mixing.
Oh yeah, that was my favorite.
Yeah, I'll bet. And what does that take us up to?
Probably from 79 through about 1988. And during that time, we played a lot of corporate shows, IBM events, like I told you before. And that got me looking into the world of corporate things,
So that reminded me, your briefcase there, at that point is when all these backstage passes, all those years of touring, I think you mentioned that 1988 was about the time that you said, I like the view from this hotel room doing this corporate stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to go and make a bunch of money and spend 3 weeks in Bermuda and get certified as a diver, that's pretty, that's the way you do
You
touring.
left rock and roll behind, basically, and shifted over to another career path, kind of, which is the corporate productions.
Yes, and it's the same thing that guided through all the music part of my career, through that part of the career is the gear. It was always the equipment. I was always involved with the gear to make things sound correct. So I'm still using equipment, but that's, I just don't use it I don't use it for musical events anymore. Although, I get a lot of musical acts in the shows that I do. The Milken Institute that I do every year. David Foster generally is the musical talent in my ballroom at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. So I hang out with these guys. I'm still doing music, just not all the time.
So we're talking about a large ballroom and a large corporate meeting with 1,000 or more attendees and speakers and walk-on cues and a lot of that. So you're kind of producing everything that they hear.
Voiceovers, record music stings, walk-ons, walk-offs, played sequentially, called by a show caller, So I still do all that.
So you're one of several person that the producer is calling the cue to.
Oh yeah, generally speaking, I always sit next to the show caller, because the show caller can then use, like, and fade it out. So it saves wordage from the show caller if I'm sitting right next to the show caller. So generally setting up, we do it all the same way.
And you're doing that all the way up to now, and you're my age, so you're 75.
Yeah.
And still doing it. Still doing these shows, and still getting to go to nice places, and so. But the responsibility then has actually kind of expanded also into kind of system design and deployment and planning ahead of time, the coverage of the room, and kind of the science and the engineering part of it.
HP, Boston Scientific, the shows that I do, Toyota, car shows, drug launches, all these different kind of shows. You get to a level of that kind of show, the budgets allow for the correct gear to be purchased. So you're not trying to beat the dollar out of everything, which is kind of what happens locally. The people working locally will do it for any amount. They'll undercut anybody. It's not really a profit motive. It's very tough to do shows here in town.
Right. In either of these two kind of related careers, has there been one or two that you mentioned, Manhattan Transfer? One or two things that have just been your favorite that stands out that you go, man, that was a perfect show, or that was a great act to work with?
Almost a little over 10 years with Manhattan Transfer. Those shows were hard to beat. The places we played, the other acts that we toured with. A couple of tours in Europe, we were hung out with Supertramp for a summer, and you hang out with that band in the summer. The shows were stunning. Anyway, that's back in the day. Manhattan Transfer sticks out. As they started to wind down, I had an opportunity to go out with Frank Sinatra, and it was called the Rat Pack Tour originally, and it was Frank, Dean, and Sammy, and I jumped at that and bailed on Transfer's shows. Were winding down. They didn't do as many per year, so I jumped on this Sinatra event. That was 2.5 years.
I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah.
And that was in the round system, right? A lot of them?
Almost all of it was in the round. Yeah, there's some articles I think you might have seen. Dave Sherman has written about in the round with, but.
So you were in on the system design on that too, to make that work in that.
Well, that was one of the first Meyer rigs, MSL2 system or MSL3s, and in the round, those original shows were interesting. That was Sinatra. That was 88, 89, and then Dean Martin. He was no longer singing on par with the other with Sammy and with Frank. So Liza Minnelli came out, and that became the ultimate event, and that ran for a year. And we played, Monte Carlo and Japan and all these places, Stockholm.
For somebody that, like myself, has only done limited touring, that just sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh man, we toured Europe so much. I had favorite restaurants and places like that. Anyway.
So at some point, the whole realm of the equipment started drastically changing from that primitive stuff that you started with, and then hodgepodging theater systems together to make large PA, and now you're dealing with some way more sophisticated speaker designs and amplifier designs.
Yeah, the timeline of the development of this stuff, a lot of things were going on at the same time. Showco in Dallas, the whole gang of people that worked for Ethos or Atlantis from Fort Wayne. That was Bill Sharp and those guys.
We got him on our list.
ML Procyse, Craig Schertz, Mike Ponzak, guys in the band became some of the best engineers on the planet, and they all gravitated to Showco in Dallas. There was myself and Hogue and Mike Sturgis, a bunch of us kind of migrated to Maryland Sound and Baltimore to the point where we could almost play softball against one another. At any rate, Shoko was developing their Prism system, Maryland Sound. We had a claw and clam rig, seafood mix. Anyway, all in one boxes. Everybody was headed that direction. And then we'd have to talk to Jeff Cox about when he first brought VDOS into the country.
So that was the evolution into line arrays, which is what everybody sees now at a show.
Right.
Yeah, is the line, the vertical array of speakers that are not stacked up from the ground but flown. Let me ask you this. We talked about what was great. What can you think of something that was a disaster or a horror story or something that you would rather forget about? That you go, oh, not that. I don't want to talk about it.
That last Uriah Heep tour was one where we were beaten to death. Of course, the Jay Giles tour, the Love Stinks tour, it was after Freeze Frame. Love Stinks, that tour. That's when Peter Wolf was broke up with Faye Dunaway, his girlfriend, and they were fighting. And anyway, they took it out on the crew a lot. That helped make me make the decision to go to corporate stuff because, man, I don't want to do that anymore.
So,
although,
go ahead.
At the turn of the century, 2001, I had to fill in for another engineer, John Lebetsky in Chicago. This was for Paul Anka. He's an interesting he's an interesting fellow.
Wrote the Tonight Show theme.
Well, My Way.
No,
he sold the rights to My Way to it's colon thing. Anyway.
So you had some experience with Paul Anka. So kind of to wrap it up, and this is what we ask all the musical artists as part of this kind of consistency from interview to interview, and that would be advice to somebody who wants to work in live audio. They may or may not be drawn instantly to the band thing, but you've also got that corporate thing. What advice would you give to somebody that just got their degree or they've been working with the band and they want to take it to the next level and maybe or maybe not end up in corporate stuff, but maybe end up in high-end touring, front of house? Words of wisdom?
I miss doing the music events. Touring in music was the highlight probably of my life. In 2001, I had a chance to go out with Little Feat. They were all friends in Los Angeles. So I went out for a year and a half with Little Feat. 9/11 happened while we were on the road. Anyway, great stories, great bunch of people, best players. Anyway, at the end of one summer, I was just done being on a bus for a month at a time. I was done. So corporate all the time. It's a different style of business. There's so many different levels of the mechanics. The music business versus the corporate world, so different. I did this stuff that I thought was fun, that I liked to do. So that's why I was in the music business so long. If I was just intent on making money, I probably would have started out as a video engineer in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Those guys. Yeah, when I was getting into the business, there wasn't a school for this stuff. Not at all. There was trade magazines. There was, Mix Magazine was an actual magazine. Yeah, I got into it as a hobby, I grew up in a wood shop. My dad had tools and stuff in a shop, so I knew I was the guy who could actually build the speaker cabinet that other people needed. And that was before, there were companies manufacturing this stuff, so.
Right.
And then
that's not an issue, doesn't even come to play these days, right?
No.
It's all engineering.
You don't have to learn how to tie a shoe, it's all Velcro. Huh?
Right.
So the basics to learn signal routing and, that kind of thing is all plumbing, how you describe things. I don't know how people learn the basics.
And nowadays, you also have to have some networking skills too, obviously.
Yeah, why would you need networking skills, Although some of the graphics look like the actual piece of equipment. I had a failed career in college because I didn't really want to go to college. I was, literally when my lottery number was drawn, were you in the lottery?
Uh-huh.
What were you?
168.
I was 268. What a coincidence.
And our birthdays are a week apart.
But anyway, as soon as my lottery number was drawn, my college career, which was already in the toilet, was gone. I was probably 2 weeks later. I was in Champaign, Illinois.
What do you
building speakers and stuff. Oh yeah, I had friends in Champaign, Illinois. Sound Factory was the name of the company, and I went there to learn about speakers, and I was just thirsty for information. So I'd go and volunteer for free. I did all kinds of things for free, just to learn, just to be in the business. Sunshine Promotions, when Steve Sebesma did his first show at Melody Skateland, I helped me and Mike Penrose built the stage, So that was seeing Steve at Bones, it's at Toby's
I
things.
talked to him for a while.
It was great. And over the years, I've seen Steve on a number of times. A terrible thing happened. I did a lot of work for Nike. I was in Beijing on a Nike event. It was actually the first display of the Chinese Olympic uniforms, which were made by Nike, and it was at the the arena the MasterCard Arena in Beijing. So that's where this thing was. Anyway, we're there for 6 days or 5 days in Beijing. Day 2, I've got my ankle's really sore, it's starting to swell up. Something's wrong with my ankle. Day 3, my ankle's like on fire. I can hardly walk. Day 4, I couldn't do anything about it because we had to do this show. So I'm stuck behind a mixing console. I've got bags of ice on my leg. I'm like, oh, this is, I called home. I called Pam at home. Honey, I think I got to go to med check when I get home. Sure enough, anyway, by the time we finished this show in Beijing and I had to go home, it was like, I'm not going to stay. I couldn't stay there because all of our English translators and everybody was flying away. The production was moving on. So I just got to get home anyway. I did finally get home, and I did get to med check, and the girl at med check goes, sent me right to the hospital. I was hospitalized for a week. I had it was a staph infection gone wild. Anyway.
Dan, thanks for being with us today and sharing all the interesting things about your career as somebody in the music business that does not play trombone.